it's very light. Very light indeed. Hello and welcome back to the channel. This is Prickly Hedgehog. I hope you're doing well. Today we're going to talk about the Crystal Lite, which, as you remember, was announced several months ago and has since been delivered by Pimax on promises to make a more affordable version of its world-renowned Crystal VR headset, which is now referred to as the OG Crystal. It was dubbed the Crystal Lite, this new, less fussy and lightweight version of the original Crystal, but still packing the high-resolution 2880 by 2880 glass aspheric lenses for crisp images, combined with its 110-degree field of view, up to 120 Hz refresh rate, and the 6 degrees of freedom tracking via cameras built into the unit. In simple terms, what they got rid of was the battery pack, the Tobii eye tracking, and the automatic pupil measuring system, which automatically adjusted the lenses to match your pupil distance. Pretty handy feature, but not one critical that Pimax felt they could remove. Thus, the weight was reduced to about 815 grams, and so too was the price point, coming in at around $800 US, with no controllers, around 900 with them. Significantly less than the original unit, especially if you went for the no local dimming version, which comes in at around 700 bucks. Now, given the quality, this is an extremely attractive headset, but those on a slightly smaller budget wanting to get the VR experience, which hands down is the best way to experience games like DCS World. Now, if Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024 delivers in November, that could be an interesting prospect for VR, and it may also be the best way to enjoy that sim, but I digress, and maybe that'll be up for discussion at a later date. Another item removed from the system was the standalone function, which means this is a PC-tethered device via DisplayPort cable, unlike the original Crystal, which in theory allows you to operate the unit in a standalone mode. Now, for most PC users flying simulation games like DCS World, this really won't be an issue, because as far as I can tell, there really isn't a feasible Wi-Fi or Bluetooth system on the market right now that supports the amount of data needed to run games like DCS World anyway. In fact, going a little further, Pimax has even identified that the DisplayPort cable could be a potential future limitation, as only so much data can be sent through them currently, and I suspect we may see a potential plateau for higher resolution levels when the Pimax Super is released later this year. Now, given technological trends, I don't expect that issue to last forever, and I'm not sure if even the fiber optic option that some people are running on their Pimax Crystal is the panacea for this kind of issue with regards to data pipelining through that particular cable. We'll have to wait and see. So is it worth it, this entry-level Crystal for the discerning VR user? Well, even at around 800 bucks, this is still a fairly expensive venture for many users on limited budgets, especially those of us in the racing sim or flight sim genre, where a lot of periphery equipment is actually needed to get the best out of the game sometimes. We're talking things like HOTASs, pedals, MFDs, maybe a gear changer, mounted keyboards and mice, a chair or some sort of seat system. And we're not even here talking about a reasonably beefy gaming PC to run the game with all of the eye candy we'd like to. In my opinion, VR is the only way to truly experience flight simulation these days. It's simply outstanding as an experience, and the Crystal Lite delivers some of the best quality images in the business. The quality of the lenses being glass, the high density pixel rate, and the wide field of view all mean that even with some of the complexity removed from the headset from the original Pimax Crystal, to cut down the cost, the visual aesthetic hasn't been compromised to a great degree. The weight reduction is really nice too, as it does make it a little bit more comfortable to wear, and I bought some extra strapping for my original Crystal to make it a little bit more comfortable and balance the weight out from those batteries, although I didn't find it particularly uncomfortable. Some users did complain about that. Now, Casmo said try wearing a set of night vision goggles as a pilot. Compared to that, the original Crystal wasn't a big deal for him, and I had a similar experience, but not everybody has that. Some people have neck injuries or other reasons why they find that uncomfortable. Everyone's built differently. Now, I know that they have increased the width of the strap in this light version as well, which makes it even easier to wear for extended periods of gaming, and you'll want to be able to do that. Spend time with extended amounts of gaming once you've got used to the VR experience, after that initial running in period, if you like, believe me, it is fantastic, and is why I said before, it's one of the only ways to truly enjoy DCS. Now, initially I had some trouble with the unit tracking properly, and I think this was caused by my many objects in the tracking space, such as microphones for recording YouTube videos and the odd mug of tea and any MFDs. I currently have a cluttered workspace as I'm bouncing around testing different setups, including VR headsets. Further, my old PC died recently. I ended up having to buy a new one, adding more clutter to the desk space as I was trying to plug in things, removing things that I didn't need, so on and so forth. Now, I was also advised by Pimax that too much light can also influence or interfere even in that tracking process. So be aware, you may run into issues if light seepage is very bright or striking the headset in some fashion. I have since resolved these issues, and the unit is tracking really well. So there isn't a great deal of difference between the quality of the original Crystal and the Crystal Lite, but in my opinion there are some features missing that I really prefer with the original headset over the Lite. Now, this review is based mostly on DCS World experiences, as that is the primary piece of software I'm running the headsets in for testing and the immersion experiences that I'm enjoying. You may have a much different experience with different games, to be fair. One of those features that I particularly enjoy is the Tobii eye tracking, which in my experience is extremely useful in DCS, where you are looking for enemy aircraft or ground targets, and indeed even cockpit flow with the eyes. That is, you're scanning or sweeping your eyes over the instruments before searching out beyond the cockpit, as you kind of would in real life. You don't want to be too fixated on the HUD or other instruments, except perhaps in instrument flying, where the weather conditions or night flying requires it. It's just a personal preference more than anything. Now, with the foveated viewing on, remember that the periphery vision portions of your view are blurred, mimicking your eyes. While there is foveated viewing on the Crystal Lite, I don't find it as an acute of an experience as it is in the original version. In simple terms, I suspect the Lite is rendering a lot more of the area that you can see, and even in the peripheral vision, as you move your head around in high definition than the original unit does, because the eye is scanning and sweeping in that original version. I could be wrong, but this is my impression of that experience. It just means that more of the world is being potentially rendered in high definition. Now, prior to producing this video, I was advised by Pimax that they are working on an upscaling system, which is still in beta testing. I had run out of time to trial and test that just yet with either of the units. That might come in a later video. Most of you will be familiar with this when it comes to flat screens, but if you're not, in simple terms, it's a mechanism for rendering a game at a reduced resolution, often represented as a percentage, and then bumping it up into the native resolution. The aim is typically to reduce the processing power of native resolution rendering in real time. Because this is a fairly complicated topic, especially as we add in subsidiary topics like image sharpening and the way our modern graphics cards are using AI algorithms to assist in some pretty trick graphics rendering magic, I think it's pertinent to leave this experience to a later video. Nonetheless, I am interested in what Pimax is doing here and how far they're pushing some of the boundaries of VR systems in order to deliver some of the best quality images and also those high frame rates that we require, say for example racing games and certainly in flight simulation. Now, one thing I do prefer over the original unit is that the Lite runs without a battery, so there's no fear you're running low on power during long missions. You don't therefore have to plug in a C port if you're worried about you're going to run out of juice, adding yet another cable potentially to an already pretty tethered experience, which those DP cables tend to bring. In summation then, do I recommend you buy the Crystal Lite? Well, as an entry-level, more affordable Crystal experience, it's hard to deny the value it'll bring to your gaming experiences, especially games like DCS World. It really does feel like you're sitting in the cockpit rather than being slightly estranged from it with the 2D screen. You have a much better sense of depth perception, and you can sense the scale of the cockpit. The Kaio, it does feel really tiny, while the KA-50, for example, feels extremely big and wide by comparison. That's the true joy of VR. It's really bringing to life these 3D aircraft in a way that 2D can't quite possibly recreate. But the experience does come at some cost. One of these costs right now, I note in a recent Pimax video, is that they have actually been a little bit of a victim of their own success with the Crystal Lite. One challenge in production processes are the glass aspheric lenses, which are much slower to produce than the plastic-based Fresnel lenses, which has limited the number of units that they can produce. This is the holdup that they have when they are producing these particular units. So it may take a little bit more to get yourself a Crystal Light as production catches up with the current demands. If you're able to afford, therefore, the OG Crystal, well, you're certainly not missing out on anything except perhaps a little bit of a higher hit for your wallet. But again, I feel that the original is a slightly better unit in terms of what it can offer, but there is weight and there is, of course, as I said, a hit on the wallet. Now, the only other thing I can see as a hindrance, perhaps, and again, this points towards those players with the money, is what the Crystal Super is going to bring to the table. Let's say you're a person who's interested in the light, you've already looked at the original Crystal, but now there's this other tantalizing thing. So slated for later this year, if I recall correctly, you can reserve a spot right now for a Crystal Super, which is going to bring even more fidelity to your VR experiences. Pimax advised that the system is powered by a DP cable, it will have reduced weight, and depending on the model, will use the either Super Micro OLED lenses or Super QLED lenses. The QLED version is the base variant essentially and will set you back around about $1,800, so a little bit more than an OG Crystal. The Super Micro OLED version will kick in at around $2,000. Now I think that model will appeal to OG owners or those looking for more than what that currently offers, but is going to be less attractive, obviously, for those eyeing the Crystal Light if price point is your absolute limitation factor. And for many, many people, that is reasonable because they are expensive units. So in wrapping up, the difference between the Light and the OG are relatively minimal, with the Light being a little more practical in terms of weight, no battery, and kinda on the wallet. The OG offers the eye tracking, the IPD auto adjustment, the interpupillary distance auto adjustment, which I felt was more functional over the Light, but again, price point. You can't go wrong with the Light if you're on a budget, but you still want a high quality headset with incredible visuals for that ultimate VR DCS world experience. Again, a great unit, worth waiting for if money is a little bit tight. Otherwise, if you think you've got some extra money to spend, then I would go for either the OG, or if you are more endowed with cash, then perhaps waiting for the Crystal Super would be the way to go. Of course, you may also want to wait for those reviews to come out from YouTubers who end up getting those units probably in the very near future. Alright, well, if you have some experience with the Crystal Light and what you enjoyed about it and what it's like to use it in DCS World, then put a comment in the comment section below and stay tuned for more videos on this piece of hardware and others to help you with your DCS World flight experiences. Cheers everyone, we'll see you next time.